just wait like 20 minutes.
Yes. And what I'm wondering is, can I pull my truck over there and load right there on the bridge on the side of the road and then put that in here? Okay.
Relax in the shade of a big tree, listen to the squirrels and birds. Down the ways with fire shelter, or are they just
Okay. Okay.
Oh, Daryl.
Hey,
Nothing on the screen?
well, you know,
Get your coat on. All right. You ready, Stacy? Okay. Stacy, would you make sure your microphone's working because your light's not?
Testing?
It's working?
Testing,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the city clerk please take roll call?
Alderman Green.
Here.
Alderman Waller.
here.
Alderman Statter. Here. Alderman Charbonneau.
Here.
Alderman Navy.
Here.
Alderman Miguel.
Here.
Alderman Anderson.
Here.
Alderman Kennedy.
Here. Okay, we have quorum. All right, next item on the agenda is presentations, communications, and appointments. There are none. Next item would be public hearings, of which there are none of those. So the next item we'll move on to will be Mayor, Board of Aldermen, and City Administrator reports and or comments. Alderman Green?
Just a quick report. I did go to the Missouri Parks and Recreation Conference held in the Ozarks 2 weeks ago for my job, and I ran into a bunch of Crestwood Park and Recreation folks. So good time to learn and mingle with people.
Good.
They were well represented.
Good. Anything else?
That's all.
Okay. Alderman Waller?
Yeah, short report. I did attend the beautification committee meeting that was on March the 6th. Discussed a few things of interest. We talked about when we're going to go ahead and start the City Hall planting as well as the Whitecliff Park plantings. Those are going to be on May 5th on the Whitecliff Park. There are going to be a lot of volunteers for that. And then for the City Hall planting, no confirmed date, but looking at late April as well as early May. The garden tour, which was the first time last year, is going to be on June the 16th. It's going to be from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And also the grant process for beautification, those applications are now due on April the 23rd. And those recipients will be notified on May 5th. And that's a $500 matching grant for neighborhoods, really for the islands and the common areas of those areas in which they want to go ahead and raise some funds, and we'll match those funds up to $500. And that's all I got.
Okay. Alderman Statter?
Thank you, Your Honor. On Saturday, March 3rd, the Crestwood Conservation Crew met at 1 p.m. at Whitecliff Community Center. Tom Krauska did a presentation on butterflies and butterfly gardens, and it was very well received at a full house. The May meeting of the Conservation Crew will actually ask everyone to join the plantings at Whitecliff on May 5th in lieu of sitting in a room and looking at a screen. So that should be a lot of fun. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Charbonneau?
No report, Your Honor.
Okay. Alderman Maybe?
No report, Your Honor.
Okay. Alderman Miguel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a brief follow-up from the last meeting. At the last meeting, Alderman Wallach kind of requested or was wondering about the value of the mall property. And I'll give you my back of the envelope response. I kind of had to look a couple of things up. I touched base with the mayor, and after that I did a little further research. And what I would do is, just ask the board to think about the Starbucks property there with the community center, bank facilities there. That property went bankrupt and was taken over by Pulaski, if you will recall. Shortly after that takeover, Pulaski asked the board, and the board granted the partitioning of a piece of that property, roughly a 3/4 acre piece, which now upon which the bank facility was built. The property was sold to Fifth Third, who I believe in 2010, Fifth Third held that property for about 5 years, at which time it was sold to First Community. When that property was sold by Pulaski to Fifth Third, the price was $850,000. So $850,000 for a prime piece of property fronting Watson Road directly across from the mall. In 2016, that property changed hands again, and at that time, the sale price was $1.6 million. So, using that as a guide, I would suggest that on the basis of the $850 for a raw piece of property, that the mall property on a per acre basis, back of the envelope, I would say would be worth $500,000, possibly a fair amount more. Roughly 50 acres, a little less than 50 acres at $500,000, you're looking at a $25 million piece of property. So that's my back of the envelope after thinking about what my colleagues said at the last meeting. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Alderman Anderson?
Thank you, Your Honor. The Planning and Zoning Commission met on March the 7th. There were 4 items that came before the commission. The first one involved the rezoning of the property at 9400 Watson Road. That's the Magnavisual site. And the request there was a rezoning from C1 commercial to M1 light industrial. That is what the property had been previously before the zoning had been changed to C1. And there was a public hearing held, and the board, after closing the hearing, moved to approve the rezoning to M1, and that should be coming to the board with the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The next item was a conditional use permit for the MSD sanitary project at 8645 Pardee Lane. That would be the property that the city occupies as the public works facility that will be, of course, transformed in the MSD project. And again, the board, after consideration, approved the request for a conditional use permit, and that should be coming to the board as well. in connection with that same project, there's a rezoning of the property at 8687 Party Lane. That involves the properties that would be in close proximity to the public works facility as we know it. And there's going to be a boundary adjustment. The plat's going to be changed, and the property, the historical structure will be moved to that property. So there needs to be a change of the zoning from M1 to R4, and that the recommendation was to do that, and that 2 would come forward. And then the final thing was a site plan approval for the actual MSD project at 8645 Party Lane, and that was approved by the commission. So basically, all those things are moving forward in that project. Looks like it's on its way. So that would be my report with regard to the Planning and Zoning Commission. On another matter, recently, in the course of my visiting with fellow residents of Ward 4, questions have come to my way regarding the stance, if any, of both the police and fire departments of the city with regard to favoring one candidate over another candidate for an aldermanic position. And so to make clear, I would like to ask the Chief of Police, does the Crestwood Police Department endorse candidates for elective office in the city of Crestwood?
No, they do not, Alderman Anderson. I believe what you might be talking about, and the citizens might be talking about, is the Crestwood Police Officers Association. I believe they have made endorsements, but that in no way is a part of the police department or official statement from the police department.
Okay. So then it would be fair to say that the Crestwood Police Department is not endorsing any candidate for the position of alderman in the April 2018 election.
That is correct.
Okay. And if someone was representing to the citizens of Ward 4 that the police department had endorsed him for the office of Ward 4 alderman, that would be untrue.
The police department has not endorsed anybody and will not endorse anybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. If I was to ask the same questions of Chief Oliveri, would those answers be the same?
Alderman Anderson, my answers would be identical.
Okay, thank you.
Again, the fire department does have a union that represents the line firefighters, and that particular union can do different things politically, but that is not an official representation of the City of Crestwood Fire Department.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for making the record clear on that. That's all I have.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy?
No report, Your Honor.
Okay. City Administrator?
Nothing.
Okay. City Attorney?
No report, Your Honor.
Okay. I've got just a couple of quick things here. First of all, for the board, as you are all aware, our municipal judge, the Honorable John Newsham, is resigning his position here with the City of Crestwood to take a full-time position as a judge in the 40th District Circuit of St. Louis County, and he will be assuming that position on April the 1st. As a result of that, our provisional judge, Honorable Charlie Berry, will be taking his position, filling his role until the city has an opportunity to appoint another presiding judge. We will be going out shortly with a RFP to open it up to people on the outside, and we'll see what type of response we get from that. The second thing I wanted to mention is that this city is working with the City of Sunset Hills actively to provide whatever assistance we can to our school district and our Catholic parishes for the safety of our children. with the rash of recent gun violence, active shooter incidents that have occurred throughout the country, we felt it would be important to show support for the school district and offer our assistance in any way possible. So we hope, myself and Mayor Freebus, as well as our police chiefs, to meet with the administration officials and come up with some type of a plan, some type of a program whereby our officers can become more familiar with those school grounds and the buildings. So we're moving in that direction. The second thing is, today we had a meeting with the Mothers Demand Action, which is part of the Mayors Against Illegal Guns organization, and is also associated with the organization that's referred to as everytownresources.org. And that organization is actively involved in working to protect the lives of children through specific gun legislation, and working to make sure that our laws are there to keep guns off of the street and keep them out of the hands of illegal individuals, felons that are not allowed to hold guns, people that have been considered mentally incapable, that are not allowed to have guns but somehow find them. So we're working to create this program, and we hope to move it forward here in the next couple of weeks. And I think that it's important for all of us, because these students in our schools are the next adults, hopefully, in our community, and the leaders of our community. So it's important that we look out for their safety and make sure that incidents like this don't happen in our community. So that's all I have. All right. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak before the board tonight may do so. If you would please keep your comments to 5 minutes, we would appreciate that. Is there anyone on this side who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mimi Duncan. I live at 9444 Arkham Drive. What I'm speaking about this evening is, on the consent agenda, there is a bill before you to increase the number of chickens in a backyard. I happen to live behind a house of chickens, and while I don't really have any problem with the chickens, the yard, the person that owns the property does not clean up after the chickens. I have to put up screens in my backyard to stop being able to see all the stuff that is collected from the chickens and not put away. I would hate to think that that would double in size because of almost doubling the number of chickens. The yard and the chicken coop, it's just not kept well, and I don't anticipate, if that individual would be able to have more chickens, that would get any better. I think it would get worse. So I would ask you to consider my comments, because I live right next door to those chickens, and I don't think it would be a good idea. Thank you.
Have you reported this to code enforcement?
Yes.
Because you know you do have to have a permit, and they are to be inspected.
Yes, I have. The condition of the yard has been reported to code enforcement. Okay. And you know, again, I did have to put a screen up because I don't want to see what's back there from my kitchen window. Sure. And I do. And I have no quarrel with people having chickens. It's just that you should keep them in good order, and adding or almost doubling, I think, would be a problem in the particular case that's in my neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on this side care to speak? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gregory A. Prangey Sr., 125 Blackthorn Drive. I came to the last meeting, and I was very impressed with how you were able to explain the costs and whatever about the police cars, because I was a little lost. So I appreciate your logic in that. I understand now about buying the police cars. But I decided to go back and see what was going on here. And I did not realize that the city of Crestwood was thinking about changing their crest. I call it emblem crest.
Logo?
Yeah. So you're right, it takes a lot of time. I did it upon myself. I don't know if you guys made any decisions yet, but I made one. So, and I made. And I don't know how to do this, give it to you.
If you present them to the city clerk, and she'll see to it that the aldermen each get a copy.
All right?
Yeah.
And since it took me so long to do,
Uh-huh.
all right, I just got to show you, okay? But it's new and improved, okay? I know people say we're at a fork in the road or whatever, but what I'm saying is I believe that we are a rooted destination, as in, pardon the pun, Route 66. And I believe that we are forging forward. So, you know, with everybody buying t-shirts for all these years, and I don't like spending money, and I'm thinking, I watched how you guys were wildly watching the pennies. Like everyone who's got these polos, or all the city officials, I thought that you could still wear them, it would still be in style, but whenever you have the money in your pocket to buy new polos or t-shirts and give them away, at least we're styling. We're moving forward. We're not necessarily changing. Look, I got a flip phone. All right, it's $20. Okay, so the idea is I don't spend much money. All right, but I thought this might be nice, and I'm not really into everything. But my credo is the word change is limiting, yet the word improvement is limitless. And so that's what inspired me to do this for you. So okay. I hope you like it.
Very good.
Take care.
I don't think we've posted any of our logos yet for people to comment on, have we?
The decision coming out of, I believe it was the last board meeting, was that we conduct a survey of the residents and do that by the city newsletter.
Okay.
I'll have to check with the assistant to the city administrator, but it's possible that that went to the printer this afternoon.
Okay. I know that it's due out the 1st of April.
Right.
And they needed like 2 weeks to get them printed.
Right. Yeah, we have to do it in advance. So
okay.
If it's at all possible to add this, we'll add it to the survey. It shouldn't be an issue. And there may be something else we can do.
Okay, good. Thank you, sir. We'll try to get it as part of the survey, but I do believe today we had to have all of our materials to the printer.
Sorry about that.
And in the future, anybody, feel free to drop something off at City Hall if it's something that you feel needs to be addressed immediately, because we will then get it, city administrator will get it, we'll see to it that it gets processed through the system, and hopefully that won't happen again. Okay?
That was my fault. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. But thank you. It's great drawing. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Anyone else on this side care to speak? Anyone on this side care to speak? Yes, sir. Sir, state your name and address for the record.
Ismail Ayouaz, 8915 Rosdale Lane. I would like to address the comment of...
Could you speak up for us, please, sir?
I would like to address the comment of Mr. Alderman Anderson. An honest mistake has been made in the flyers that I distributed. And I've made aware of this mistake yesterday by one member of this board and by city administrator this morning. The first thing that I did is to change right away the wording. And I posted on social media a statement that I want to read you so to make things clear. You know, we are all human beings and we're making mistakes sometimes. Official statement: an honest mistake was recently made in flyers distributed in small percentage of Crestwood Ward for residents. So to avoid any confusion and issues, I want to clarify. I am not endorsed by the Crestwood Police and Fire Department as city entities. And I want to apologize to both of you to include you in that endorsement. That was not my intent. I am endorsed by the Crestwood Police Officers Association, which represents 18 union members out of 27 persons, and the Crestwood Professional Firefighters, which only represents the union firefighters, but not the secretary, the 4 captains, assistant chief, or chief. I hope that this statement clarifies the endorsements I received, and I apologize for this honest mistake made, which was really an oversight of my part. The flyer distributed was corrected to reflect the proper wording, which I sent this morning to City Administrator Simpson. And I want to tell you, Mr. Alderman Anderson, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm very disappointed that you didn't reach out to me to talk to me. We could have just, I could have told you that directly in person on the phone, or send me an email. I think this is the way adults have to resolve issues next time. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I?
Thank you, Mr. Ayers.
Yeah,
Sure, go ahead.
yeah,
Just keep it civil.
sure. The flyer that is in question says it's maybe endorsed by both police and fire department, exclamation point, read the official letters. It doesn't sound like a mistake to me. Moreover, this document was never provided to me for any comment before it was handed out to the citizens of Crestwood. It's out there, it's like toothpaste out of a tube, and the representation is there, and I suppose there's nothing we can do about it, but it's certainly not something that promotes good government. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments on this side? I see none. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is old business. There is none. Next item is approval of the consent agenda. Any member of the board wishing to remove anything from the consent agenda may do so at this time. And if you would turn your light, Alderman maybe.
If we could pull the ordinance concerning the number of domestic animals and fowl, the chicken ordinance, please.
Okay. Alderman maybe's removed that. Alderman Miguel?
I'd like to pull the minutes for discussion.
Okay, which ones?
Oh, of the last meeting, September 27th,
The regular meeting?
Regular meeting.
Okay. Okay. And I'm going to ask the board then to basically allow us to read the adjourned to closed session minutes for a motion and a second, and a yea or nay on approval of that.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay. Let's go ahead and take that one first. So we have a motion to approve the February 27th adjourned to closed session minutes. A motion to approve those?
I just made that, Your Honor. I thought Alderman Sherman had seconded it.
Oh, okay. No, I thought that was the consent to remove it from the consent agenda.
Oh, so we can just do it. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll move that we approve.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is items removed from the consent agenda, so we'll take them in order. Alderman Miguel, since yours was the first.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to ask the board to turn to page 6 of the minutes. It's page 8 of the packet. The third paragraph there, which begins with Alderman Miguel suggested. I wish to respectfully ask the board to approve the insertion of the following statement as the beginning of paragraph 3 on page 6 there of the minutes. And the statement is this. Alderman Miguel pointed out that, according to the administration's fleet mileage report of February the 8th, the wrecked police vehicle has 75,000 miles on it, and the 2011s slated for replacement had but 69 and 70,000 miles. So, I think that accurately presents what I stated at the beginning of my discussion, and it also places the ensuing discussion into perspective and sets the stage for the subsequent comments regarding the running hours. So, so I will move to have that statement which I read inserted, and I would ask for a second.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for that addition to the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
clerk, clear on that change? Okay.
I have a copy of it if the city clerk would like.
Okay, if you want to pass that down so we can give that to her. Thank you. sorry. Yes, then we're going to ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, so that takes care of the minutes. The next item on the agenda that Alderman Mabee pulled is on the chicken ordinance. Alderman Mabee, you may proceed, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I wanted to just provide a brief recap. As I indicated in my report the last time, the Public Works Committee did hear this issue at our last meeting. We discussed, and you can see on page 12 of the packet, it's the back of the first page on this issue, our neighbors and surrounding cities, how these issues are handled. The city of Ladue, Kirkwood, and Sunset Hills have no limit. Webster has 8, Oakland has 8, Clayton has 10, and Creve Coeur allows between 8 and 12 depending on lot size. And the Public Works Director had indicated about 30 homes in Crestwood have these permits to have chickens, and a certain number of them have made the request to have the higher number of chickens. And it was indicated at that meeting that of the 30 homes, there had been no complaints lodged with city staff about the keeping of these chickens. It sounds like there now have been some complaints lodged. There have been some issues. There was a debate between whether to raise the limit to 7 or 9. The board ended up recommending 9 unanimously. There was not a lot of motivation to allow the unlimited keeping of chickens. The fear was that would get a little bit too commercial, perhaps. And I think I'm still open to the idea of allowing 9 chickens as has been recommended. But I think while we have this section 617 before us, and as I read through it a little closer, we have some provisions that we can revoke these permits for a failure to provide adequate facilities, and if there's a nuisance involved. And if you look down at subsection F, there's requirements to keep the enclosures clean and sanitary. But there probably could be some clarity added about keeping the yard itself clean and sanitary when these chickens are kept. And so I'd like to hear some other comments from the board on this issue, but I think I'm inclined to maybe let staff take a quick crack at editing this to provide some additional restrictions and requirements that property owners keep their yard clean to have these chickens. And if that doesn't take place, the annual permit will either be revoked or not renewed. And in the case of the specific residents' comments and complaints, if staff could check with code enforcement, see where that stands, and if there is an ongoing issue that falls within the code, if that permit could be withdrawn. Those are my remarks for right now.
Alderman Stanner?
Thank you, Your Honor. I absolutely concur with everything that Alderman Mabee just said. I'm fully in support of raising this up to 9. We have a lot of good reasons to allow it. We've only heard one complaint so far about it being a problem. I do agree absolutely, though, that we should tighten up recourse for citizens who are having an issue so that if we do run into problems, we have a means of pulling or not renewing the permits. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy?
Thank you, Your Honor. I also agree with the comments by both aldermen. A question for Mr. Gillum. On the memo that you submitted to us on page 11, in the first paragraph, third sentence, you say that there is an annual permit and the city must get initial permission from each of their adjacent neighbors for the residents to have chickens. I'm guessing that's for the initial permit, not for the renewal of a permit?
That's correct.
But then on page 15, there's the City of Crestwood chicken information from the web. And item number 4, the second sentence says, if half or more of the adjacent neighbors are agreeable for them to have chickens, then the permit will be approved. That seems to be a little bit of a contradiction there in terms of one you say that you need approval from all the adjacent neighbors, and then on the chicken guidelines, it talks about just having half of them needing to be able to approve having chickens. So while we're cleaning up the language, I think it'd be good to have the guidelines mirror what's required in practice. Maybe there's a fifth number that says the initial application requires permission from all the neighbors, and then future permits require, half, something like that. But I do think that the ordinance is sort of self-policing in terms of if there is a problem, there's ways to rectify that. Hopefully, Ms. Duncan's problem will be resolved in the future. The other question I had was, and I think it's great having no problem with the chickens, but 9 chickens, that's a lot of eggs, and I'm not sure, that's, one of my friends has a permit in Crestwood. He has 3 chickens, and I think he gets, on average, in normal weather, about 5 eggs per week per chicken, so that would be about 5 dozen a typical month. So if you have 9 chickens, that could be 15 dozen eggs a month. And I raised 6 children. I think we went through maybe a couple dozen eggs a month. So I'm just kind of curious, 15 dozen eggs, would there be, maybe someone has a need for 15 dozen eggs, that's fine, but is there a commercial component to that? Grant, did you guys talk about that in your discussion at all? This is for consumption by the family, by the residents, right? It's not for selling eggs on the market, correct?
The ordinance doesn't address that. I mean, nothing, I suppose, would stop a family from going to like a farmer's market and selling eggs, although from what we gleaned, prior, the discussion at the last Public Works meeting was actually fairly brief on raising the number of chickens. When the previous time, a few years ago, when the Public Works Board raised the number to 5 chickens, there was a great deal of testimony from the residents who were pushing for that. The numbers for how many dozen eggs you get from a chicken, I don't know. I know there were, and maybe Mr. Gillum can weigh in on this, but I thought that there were some complaints that there were some families that were consuming 5 chickens worth of eggs, and I guess part of it comes into the fact that chickens below a certain age are not producing eggs, and chickens above a certain age are not producing eggs, and so families that keep those chickens that are not egg producing because they don't have the heart to do something else with the chicken, they keep them around and their egg consumption goes down, so they want to keep a number of viable chickens. So I think that was kind of the push for this.
That makes sense, but is there a business license needed if you are raising chickens, producing eggs and selling them at a farmer's market?
I'd have to look at that, Alderman Kennedy, and just get back with you. But, we certainly don't. That would be a home occupancy permit for one. And then beyond that, I'd have to review the ordinances.
Great, thank you. No other comment?
Keep in mind that, the number of people that would probably increase their flocks as a result of this approval, if it were approved, is probably very minimal. You might have 1 or 2 that would put more, but at the same time, they're required to maintain a certain amount of space per chicken. So if you're going to add, 4 more chickens to your flock, you'd have to have adequate space for them, or you wouldn't be able to keep them. And that would then involve the Humane Society or the St. Louis County Animal Control, who would dictate that. So, Alderman Walker, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Well, again, I too, as resident Duncan, soon to be automatic representative here, Ward 1, I view her concerns. Again, I do live next to a resident that has hens, 5 hens. I work from home as well as my wife works from home as well. Hens do make noises. When they have eggs, they cackle. All of them come in and they cackle. And whenever they have, and it is laughable. The only thing is, I'm on the phone, and my wife is on the phone, and those recordings are made, and she's subject to concerns because we have a dog in the house too, so she's also subject to discipline as well. And it's just not only the noise factor to it, but when I purchase, I'm a big property rights person. When I purchased my property, I don't know if I would have purchased a property next to his. Although it doesn't decrease the value, it's just it's my property. I'm comfortable with what I have. And when somebody, I'm not sure whether the amount of hens will be increased, but it's just my perception of my property. It's not as valuable as it was when I purchased the property, and that's what I want to say. Again, there are some concerns that I've got too in regards to the upkeep. When someone goes to almost double in size, does the size of the coop that they have in a property increase in size? So again, we have ordinance in place in regards to accessory buildings. I don't know if we have any size in regards to the coops for the chickens to work to make sure. And again, it's more burdensome in regards to our code enforcement officer regarding his duties or her duties for that. So again, I echo the concerns of Mimi, and I'm not in favor of going up to 8 or 9. Again, there are other cities out there that don't have it at all. There's Manchester that only allows it when the residence is 2 acres. There's Wildwood when it's only 5 acres. No, in regards to St. Peter's, there's Town and Country, and Washington Woods. So there are other communities out there, and we're fortunate because we're in a city ourselves. We can make our own rules, and that's what one of the finding things in regards to municipality compared to St. Louis County. Again, we can enforce our own rules, and I'm comfortable where it's at to 5. Again, that's consistent with some of the other cities too, which is Richmond Heights and Shrewsbury. So I will add that value of the 4.
Okay. Alderman Statter, you were next.
Thanks. Actually, Grant made the point that I was going to make when I hit my line about, especially in the case that brought this up originally, the lady that was looking to increase the number of chickens that she has several children, and they have a lot of food and allergy sensitivities, and that's why she wanted to do it so that they could have enough for their own family. But speaking with other residents that do keep them, it's exactly what Grant had said. They buy them for eggs, but they fall in love with them and they don't want to have fried chicken when they stop laying. So they end up keeping the chickens and they want more than a lay. Once again, I certainly understand the concerns, but I'm comfortable with tightening up our ordinance for recourse if there's issues and still approving it. Thank you.
Okay. I think Alderman Charbonneau, you were next.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple items. Number one, I am in favor of raising the limit to 9. I do think that most individuals who are doing this are not, particularly where we live here in the city, are not primarily doing this to have a small business. I think they are trying to do it because there are food allergies or because of their beliefs with how food is maybe processed or how it's raised. Whether that be any humane method or they just want to know where their food comes from, whichever that may be. I do believe in the personal property rights of those individuals to do that. But I think some great points have been made about this. Like I said, I am in favor of raising it to 9. But 9 chickens, does that mean we have to look into the structure of the facility that are kept into? Can they have that and a shed? Is that going to start cluttering things up? I think those are the things that need to be looked at and addressed maybe before we do pass this. But I am also open to passing the 9 to go ahead and proceed unless city staff's like to get this done relatively quickly. Only other thing I would like to know is if Alderman Wallach could demonstrate the cackle noise.
Yeah.
That's okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
The one that starts and then
so they're all at the same time.
One of my neighbors.
No, just one. And then they all get excited.
Cheer them on.
Sounds exciting stuff.
I have a neighbor that also does have chickens, and we do occasionally hear them, but that's okay. It's not. I don't view it as a nuisance. But with that, I yield the floor.
Okay. You know, I would just question Mr. Gillum and maybe bring this to the attention of the board in reading through his memo, that there's an annual permit and the city must get initial permission from each of their adjacent neighbors. Wouldn't that apply if they're increasing their flock from the allowed 5 to 9?
I don't think so. They've already got a permit, and if we raise the number, then that would be covered by the existing permit.
Okay. All right. That's why I asked the question. Alderman Brady, you were next.
What's the method for cleaning a chicken coop? Do they hose it out? Do they sweep it out?
Yeah, we'll sweep it out.
You sweep it out. Okay, I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that all?
That's all.
Okay. Alderman Miguel?
Thank you, Your Honor. To Alderman Reading, I would say both. It's wet, and then it's hosed. At least that's what I've seen. On page 16 of our packet, under eggs, it notes that 3 hens will give 2 eggs a day. And if there are 9 chickens, that would be 3 times that number, right? So that'd be 6 eggs a day. That's a lot of eggs. That's 42 eggs a week, 3.5 dozen. For a family of 7, that would be 6 eggs a week. I was at the same meeting as Alderman maybe when a young lady came and just came up and made the request. And the board discussed it and voted to make the recommendation to increase the number to 9. So what I'm saying then is 1 request for, and it appears to me 1 vote for and 1 vote against. So I'd be inclined to go slowly here, and I think along the lines that Alderman Wallach suggested. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Alderman, maybe?
I was going to make a motion that we postpone consideration of the ordinance for a month, or for 2 meetings, to allow staff to tighten up some of the provisions raised in my earlier comments. And I guess right before I make that motion, my only other thought was another option if the board is hesitant to going to 9 is we could incrementally take this up and go to 7 and see if that changes the lay of the land. And if there's not an issue there, we could creep it up to 9 going forward. I'm not going to make that motion now. We can take that up the next time, but I would make the motion to postpone this for 1 month to allow staff to provide some revisions.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone this particular ordinance for 1 month.
Or 2 meetings, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, 2 meetings, approximately
a month. Okay, so to be heard perhaps the 2nd meeting in April.
Yes.
Keep in mind that's the election results meeting and swearing in the new alderman. Is that going to give us enough time, or do you want to do it first meeting in May?
Would that have to be under old business?
It'd have to be under old business, yeah.
Mr. Gillen, what are your thoughts? Is that an adequate amount of time? Too much? Too little?
I think that'll be enough time.
Okay, I'll make that motion then.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move the consideration of this ordinance to the first meeting in May. All those in favor say aye.
Or second meeting in April.
Or second, what?
Second meeting in
Second meeting in April. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, so we will postpone this until second meeting in April. Sure.
Just to make sure we're clear, the only guidance I've picked up on from your comments, Alderman, maybe was referring to subsection F of 6-17 and adding in some language about the yard or the area that the chickens would occupy outside of the enclosure and making it clean and sanitary?
Yes, the cleanup F, you could probably tie it into G, which kind of relates to dogs and things like that. And that was also the last provision of subsection B. I think I touched on that as well, where it says the permits may be revoked or suspended for, and it provides two reasons. One, a failure to provide adequate or humane facilities, or two, it's deemed a nuisance. I think you would add at least a subsection 3 there and tie it into F or G, so you could say, or you know, failure to follow any of the requirements herein or something along those lines, but I'll see what staff and the city attorney come up with, but those would be the only changes.
Understood. I think we've got our guidance.
And it might be advisable, Mr. Gelman, if we have the code enforcement officer meet with that resident, take a look at what the problem is, and she says she's reported it, but nothing's been done.
Yes, I'll talk to him in the morning.
Thank you.
And I guess just briefly to Mr. Simpson, and while we're looking at this, and those are my thoughts, but over the next month, if we wanted to take a look at some adjacent cities and make sure they could have a code section that addresses all of our issues and concerns. So
certainly.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy?
Yeah, I just wanted to add also what you're looking at, that Mr. Gillum, just on my comments about the guidelines being consistent with your memo and making sure that they're consistent, and that if we need something in terms of the ordinance to reflect what's in the guidelines, that would be good. Thank you.
Alderman Sherman?
No further comment.
Okay. All right. That concludes the items removed from the consent agenda. The next item on the agenda is new business. This will be the discussion of aldermanic goals and priorities. So I'll open up to Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. I provided the board with two documents tonight. One you'd recognize as the retreat summary from a year ago that the board adopted. And the second is a section from an annual budget that represents the last time I put pen to paper and kind of went item by item through all of the priorities or goals that were established in the retreat summary and gave a status update. I have two I guess, points following on that. One is maybe a suggestion about a way to proceed tonight, and the second is, I guess, maybe some starting suggestions to get the conversation going. I guess my suggestion for procedure is that I'm hoping that the board will have more of a free-flowing conversation that probably necessitates suspending the rules a little bit so that we can be a bit more comfortable in how we converse. I'm not looking for motions and specifically marking up this document like a piece of legislation, but rather I want to hear the conversation, get the general sense. I'll refer to the audio after the meeting and type up a summary, modify that with what we've currently got in terms of the retreat summary, and then come back to the Board of Aldermen at a later meeting with what I've put together, my work product, and then you guys can make whatever final tweaks are needed at that meeting. So let's kind of try and approach it with that spirit. I think that would be most productive. In terms of a way to start, I had...
Before you get into the content, let me ask the board for a motion, a second, to waive the normal rules of two rounds of comments on an issue. Let's get that out of the way.
So moved. Second.
Motion to second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, proceed, Mr. Simpson.
So first, I'd recommend we start focusing on the short-term priorities. I think those are probably where we would spend most of our time tonight. Some of these have been accomplished. Some of them might need some modification. Some might need no modification at all. But that's really the most immediate. That's, to me, what I'm looking to make, to either accomplish or make very significant progress toward accomplishing in the next 12 to 24 months. And then secondly, let's look at the long-term priorities, and there I expect to see more, incremental tweaks. I was planning after the meeting included based on your feedback. I was really going to take most of the long-term priorities and figure out what was the logical next step on those items and just make that the next long-term priority. So to start, I think unless someone disagrees, I think it's fair we can remove the tax issue item from the short-term priorities. That was accomplished, it's done. I'd also say we could remove the community festivals item. We've got the Suncrest Fest that's planned. Parks and Rec is fully staffed and has increased the number of programs that we have on offer, and so that at least clears out the short-term priorities list somewhat, and maybe it has some room so that we can add some new immediate priorities. Obviously, if you disagree on the community festivals one, I'd be interested in getting some direction as to what more specifically you all are looking for us to do. I've got plenty of thoughts. We could have many conversations about all these ones. I think I'll stop talking at this point, let somebody else pick it up.
Alderman, maybe?
I mean, based on the short-term priorities, I think really you've got 1, 2, 3, and 5 all covered. I think the only one I showed as an open item was 4. I think we're obviously working on sidewalk maintenance. I know we're awaiting a street report that's been discussed extensively by this board. So I think that's one I showed as an open item. But other than that, I thought you had them covered. And then I have some thoughts I can wade into. My first, just a question or a point of information, is you had distributed to the board your internal goals for the year, for the short term, organized by city department. And I guess my question posed to you is, where do you see those working into this document? Are those all short-term priorities, or how do you see those being integrated into this document?
Probably number off the top of my head, I'd say 90 to 95% of those are my self-identified, self-motivated goals, things that I'm trying to accomplish. And I don't know, I guess some have more priority than others, but they're all pretty high priority for me, so I'm working on them myself. And in that they are suggestions for me to myself, I don't think that they're necessary to include in this document, because the purpose of this document is for me to make sure that the city is getting done those things that the Board of Aldermen deems important. If my goals overlap with yours, great. But I don't think there's any need to reproduce anything that I've already got on there unless you want to see it slotted in a specific place.
Well, that was kind of my question. I thought your list was great. I thought it was comprehensive. There's nothing I would strike off your list. I had a question about a few things, but there are things on your list that I think are also board priorities. That was kind of my question, is if they're already on your list, do we just put short-term priorities, knock out your own list? Or do you want us to say, okay, take these 6 things off your list and make them, duplicate them as a board item?
If there are items that were on my list that you all feel especially strongly about, then I would include them on your document. That way I know these are especially high priority.
Okay, I'm going to go.
Your goals supersede my own.
Well, we're all a team, and like I said, I think your goals are good. And some of these, obviously, we all have our own areas we're looking at. But I mean, some of your goals for specific departments are more internal management type things that seem like a great idea, but it's really kind of below a board level item to address. And then I guess the other thing is, this document we have, it's eloquently written, the strategy and performance, especially as we get into the long-term goals. I mean, some of the short-term goals I had, things I'd like to see added this year. I mean, they range from being, really important, that are probably worthy of making this list, to fairly petty things that I don't think should be like one of the city's big 5 goals for the year, but it's one I would love to throw on your list of, hey, can you take care of this? So I'm kind of posing these questions to you. I want to see this done before I just rattle off a bunch of items.
I would.
And I'll give you a representative example while you're thinking.
Okay.
So a year ago, if not more, we authorized spending a small sum of money to rescue and salvage that Anne Morrow artwork. And I would like to see city staff make research what, if anything, we can do with that, make some recommendations as far as us displaying it, donating it, or selling it, and see if we can get those, end of the year, beginning of next year. Hey, Lindbergh would love to display it in their new office building, the art museum would love it, we'll hang it behind the dais, or we'll just put it on eBay. I don't think that's one of the big 5 goals for the year, but if we could slot that on your list. So that's kind of a question to you, I guess. How would you like to see something like that?
I think it's important to keep the short-term priorities list on this document fairly select and things that are truly high priority items for the entire Board of Aldermen and not, one-off things. Because clearly something like that compared to something that's like comprehensive plan implementation progress,
sure.
Yeah, there's a difference in importance. One is nice to do, the other one benefits every single resident, and I think all aldermen and many residents would be in agreement that, yeah, that's definitely something that we want to make a priority this year. I think it's important to keep that short-term priorities list narrow and focused so that I can actually deliver on these things. If I have 7 things that I know I can get done this year, or a list of 20 things and I'll have to pick 8 because I won't be able to do all of them, I think you'd rather know the 7 that you'd certainly get done or make significant progress on. So I'd say be selective. And yeah, we can talk about the Anne Morrow art.
Okay. I just don't want to, 10 years from now, the Board of Aldermen opens a closet and they're like, what is this? And,
Let me just say with regards to that, and I'll make it short. There's a gentleman here in Crestwood who's developing plans right now for a display case for one of those frames, along with the plaque, which I intend to put out in the lobby. It will be a symbol of the history, piece of the history of the Crestwood Mall. The other panels, could very easily be offered to Lindbergh High School for their Anne Morrow room. I'm sure they wouldn't want them all, but they did take some of the plaster castings from the below these items when they were working on that. So on that demolition. So there's any number of areas where we can dispose of these, but I'm with the city administrator. I don't think at this point in time that's a high priority. We're working on it, but it takes time.
Okay. No, I would, to me, that's definitely something that would go more on this internal list, just so we don't lose track of it. But I'll yield the floor for now, because I'm going to, based on your recommendations, Mr. Simpson, I'm going to go through your list and circle the ones that I'd like to see on our list real quick. So I'll yield the floor for now. I'll be back in a minute.
Next person. Alderman Sherman.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. There's one thing there's an item I'd like to see added to a goal, and that's something in White Cliff Park. I think it'd be nice to see and I know we've kicked this around before, but putting a dock boundary around the actual the pond over there, lake, or quarry, the technical term, thank you, Your Honor. That way, it's something that could be more open year-round, something that, I know every time that there's the pay to fish over there, it's almost always sold out. I mean, the last several times I know it has, and it's just catch and release. But I think that's something that could be utilized more. I know there's always, when I say I know there's always, but it's not like, I'm like, oh, here it is. But the Missouri Conservation is always partnering with other lakes and other ponds. I see when I've gone to other locations with helping stock those items in those lakes. That's something they would probably help us do to teach fishing and also provide, some enjoyment for not just senior residents or retired individuals who may get down there more often, but I think it's something that, would be a useful use for teenagers, something and other children to learn how to fish and enjoy that property. It would also help create a boundary so we don't have to worry about people, I mean, you know, we always have every once in a while, we hear the police department says they catch somebody down there swimming, but, which from what I understand, from those of you who grew up in Crestwood, I think may be a time-honored tradition that's not talked about. But the other item, the main item that I do think needs to be one of the top priorities, and I think we all, I mean, it's the elephant in the room, so I'll say it, but I think we do need to do something about Mount Crestwood. If not, somebody needs to get up there, post a flag, and claim the first person to climb it. But we do need to do something about that and moving that project forward. I think we do need to apply maybe some pressure with moving forward. We are coming up on about the year anniversary, I believe, when the project is supposed to be done. And I do think that needs to be, and I know it is a focus of the city. I'm not saying this to say that you all are not focused on it or that we are not focused on it. I know we are, but it just needs to be mentioned that, you know, it is one of our top priorities and that we need to make sure that we figure out something to do there. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Davies?
All right. Going through the city administrator's list, the things that, and I guess feel free to object or say those are more of a long-term or those should be on your list. The things I thought were important to add to our short-term list, first you have it on the second page, you have continue to monitor mall development, work with developer to deliver project. I would move that to the short-term list, and I would incorporate Alderman Charbonneau's remarks as well that to adhere to the contract or see if there's modifications suggested, what's in the city's best interest, work with the developer, or in the alternative, if things are not going well, come up with contingency plans as appropriate. So I think the mall project definitely needs to be a short-term priority. Going through your list in order then, you have see all capital projects are constructed on time, under budget, in accordance with all city and state policies without sacrificing quality. I think that's a good one. I know it's been a goal of the board the last few years to get the capital projects done in the year they're budgeted, so I'd love to see this be the year. Going down under finance, I think updating the purchasing policy is an important goal to have done. If nothing else, adjust the purchasing policy amounts for inflation, and in conjunction with that, I had a note to review the check signing procedures in section 2-83 just to make sure we're up to date on that, and may our auditors have a suggestion, but just to make sure we're being as appropriate as we should be with that. The second to last one you had under finance, I would add it as a short-term goal is just have a balanced general fund budget for 2019 to propose to bring to the board. And that, I'm sure you have that in your head anyway, but I think it's important to put that in writing as a commitment to the residents. On the second page, second item, you had oversee zoning code rewrite and complete in a timely manner. I would add that one to our short-term priority list. And my two questions from that is, I think Mr. Jones or Mr. Simpson, that would include a sign code rewrite as well?
That's correct, and we've already we've gone out to bid, and we're actually in the process of developing an ordinance to bring that before the Board of Aldermen. But yes, that includes a sign code rewrite.
Okay, very good. Second question, we had a joint meeting with planning and zoning and maybe public works a little while back about design standards in the city, and specifically about incorporating more masonry standards, at least on Watson Road, for all types of buildings. Will that be covered in our zoning code rewrite?
Adam's nodding, so
okay.
I'm having trouble recollecting what that was, but he says it is so.
Okay, and just as the mall project is coming online, hopefully, and other projects are being proposed, I mean, some of the things being presented in that presentation were great, and I'd love to see some of those things worked in. You have continued to identify opportunities for revenue growth, including but not limited to economic development. To me, that's really a short-term and a long-term list. I mean, or a long-term and a short-term goal. As kind of a minor subpart on that, but one I think we should make a short-term goal. I would analyze our fees for permits and everything else, and consider an inflationary increase, and probably make that an annual item. If the permits go up, 1.5% a year to cover inflation, it's not a big deal. The last time we waited, 20 years to adjust our fees, and all of a sudden it was sticker shock because we were doubling or tripling fees. So I would make those changes incrementally, make sure we're not losing ground to inflation. The work on solutions to improve Watson Industrial, I would make that a short-term goal, maybe a long-term goal as well. That was what I had off your list. Let's see. Some more minor short-term goals that I don't think are quite worthy of our list, but I'd like to see on your list. I had mentioned the Ann Morrow art. I would like to see on the long-term plan, I think it's already there, but just comprehensive plan implementation. We've already covered economic development. On your short-term list, if we could have the Parks Board and staff debate the highest and best use for that 1120 Tahiti property. And I know it's been, maybe we could make it beehives, maybe we could put a basketball court there, but if we could look into those kind of things. On your more detailed list, not the board's list, if we could sell any surplus property, including the Big Bend property that's been discussed before. Again, on your own short-term list, not the board's list, if staff could analyze our facility usage over in White Cliff Park and see if there's any way about to expand the leased space for the Friends of Animal Control to provide them with the remaining portion of that building they're not currently leasing out, and if in conjunction with our new Public Works building and our annex building, if we could move our remaining stuff out of there, not the basement, just the first floor. And then I'd also like to see us address, it's been discussed a few times, we've exchanged some emails, that MSD right-of-way in Ward 3, the 20-something odd homes back up to off Capelia and Grant Park, that they are not maintaining. If we could contact their engineers and have them provide the analysis that's in their stormwater document, and then go from there. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
You want to provide that laundry list to the city administrator? So,
I was typing. I think I've got it.
You've got it all? Okay.
Thanks.
I think it'd be good if you still forwarded a copy of that to him.
Okay.
Okay? That way we're sure we got it covered.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Alderman Anderson, you were next.
Thank you, Your Honor. In going around the neighborhoods and so forth, one of the things that you realize is that people really want to take care of their property, but sometimes there's a situation in the neighborhood that presents a problem, and sometimes it's just because of circumstances beyond anyone's control. Other times it's something else. But I think if there's some frustration with people that sometimes these things aren't being addressed. So I'm wondering if we could have a report, I'm just going to call it a problem property report. In other words, if there's complaints from the code enforcement about a certain property, or someone has an item to bring up with respect to a property, that can be kind of brought together and brought to our attention, and then we can see what action, if any, can be taken. And because it is a source, I think, for some frustration for some residents that a property, it just seems to be there and it's an eyesore and they don't know what to do about it. And if they had a way of funneling that frustration to us and we could get a report then from code enforcement or whatever, and then we would know how to maybe react better. Maybe we need to change some ordinances. Maybe we need to do some other things. But to have, because I don't think it's an overwhelming amount, at least not in the area I'm familiar with, but there is some, and we'd like to keep those neighborhoods up and strong. So I would like to see some sort of report to this board regarding what code enforcement is encountering in terms of complaints and issues and so forth.
Yes. Okay. Alderman Stetter?
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Actually, this ties in a little bit with what Alderman Anderson has just asked for. It's just another type of report that I was looking for. I'd love to find a way to bring more visibility to economic development and what we have going on, perhaps some kind of a regular report of businesses coming, businesses going, opportunities that are shareable. I know sometimes that you have to keep that a little bit under wraps while contracts are under negotiation. But I'd love to just have some kind of a standard report that gives us an idea of what's coming, what's going, and better visibility to
that. That might tie in with something that I believe our city planner's been working on. That I believe you're going to present, if I'm not mistaken, at a later date to the planning and zoning board regarding the marketing plan. EDC. Okay. So, okay. Alderman McGill.
Thank you, Your Honor. The one thing on your list that I would like to maybe focus in on, it seems like there's been a request for several reports. Well, I'll just add 3 more to that list. But really what I'd like to do is see if these reports can be tied in to this improved code enforcement, the second item on the top of your list. Improve code enforcement services by bringing iWork into the field with CEO. A code enforcement officer, I assume.
Yes.
Okay. Well, to what Alderman Anderson was just saying, and I don't know what iWork is or what it does, but could one of the categories be problem properties? Again, I don't know how that software works, but I would think that there would be ways for the code enforcement officer, when he's entering something, might indicate the type of problem that it is, whether it's property problem or a trash problem or whatever.
Yeah, iWork does a number of different things for us in public services, and one of those is it's the system into which we enter all of our code enforcement violations. This is something that Code Enforcement Officer Spencer has been doing since he came on, and that item that you're referring to there is simply we're intending to procure either a tablet or a laptop and get that installed in the Code Enforcement Officer's vehicle. Currently, when you have code violations, he's out in the field, he might see, oh, so-and-so needs to, this house needs to do something. So he'll mark it down on a piece of paper, drives back to the office at the end of his patrol, types it into the computer and generates the paperwork, which is double entry. We're proposing to get either a laptop with an air card or a tablet with a mobile data plan that will allow him to just enter it into the system in the vehicle, saving that extra step. So, yeah, in iWork, we should be able to generate a report. I mean, what Alderman Anderson was requesting essentially is just give us a report of all of the code enforcement violations that are going on. And that should be something we can generate. That gives you at least, the address and basic information about the violation. and a status.
Since you're going to have digitized that, could that be, that file be available for review by members of the board?
We'll give some thought to implementation, but what I'm thinking off the top of my head is we would just generate that report, and it would just be a list, and we'd send it out to the board on a regular basis. We'll figure out what interval makes the most sense, if it's monthly or quarterly or whatever.
I assume that this iWork would also be able to produce some summaries. In the past, there have been on and off again attempts to summarize code violations, and there have been reports with with various statistics on it and all that sort of stuff. Would something like that be available through this iWork?
It's a capability in the system because the implementation and the utilization on the code enforcement module is started basically in December with the new code enforcement officer. The data isn't quite there to really come to any sort of conclusive trends, but perhaps in 12 months or so, you'll have a good number of code enforcement violations that you can see. And I was getting a demo from this from Mr. Gillen a few weeks ago. We can plot it all on a map, and you can look and see, okay, this part of town really has a lot of issues. What are the types of issues that are going on in this part of town? And what that will enable us to do is selective enforcement. We might send out an awareness letter to, say, a particular problem neighborhood and say, for the next quarter, we're going to be really, really targeting tall grass. So be aware, code enforcement is going to be looking for this, and hopefully that improves cooperation.
Okay. Sometimes perhaps too often, I'll call you and
never too often
about an issue. The most recent being gumballs and dead trees. And invariably, I'll give you an address connected with the issue. What I'd like to be able to do is look into your system, go to that address or find that address and see the status. At least make sure that it's been entered and not overlooked. And again, I may report issues to you, but then I don't expect, or time may go by and I don't hear anything. So I think it'd be nice if I could go in and find out the status of an issue. And if it's something I could do while I'm talking to the resident, I can give them the status of that particular item.
We can look into whether or not it's possible to add read-only users. It's something we have to look into.
Okay. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Charbonneau, you were next.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just some other things to add, in no particular order of just, ideas. I was thinking about some emails that we've gotten this week from Mr. Zavis, for example. We have a lot of individuals in our community that not just serve on our boards, but maybe aren't as involved. Maybe we don't know who these individuals are. The gentleman who submitted the drawing earlier this evening, and prior to that, we had other artist rendering who is known to other boards, but maybe not necessarily per se to the actual Board of Aldermen. I do think it would be helpful, and I'm going to address this more towards public awareness, particularly with using our newsletter. From time to time, if we are looking for maybe, I don't know if we want, not necessarily a contest per se, but ideas of, hey, maybe it could be a feature like ask a question, something that maybe we were looking for an outside the box answer, maybe just to kind of garner additional thoughts from the community, maybe individuals that can't come up here on Tuesday evening or don't know how to contact us. Maybe ask questions, try to engage the community, whether that be from possible upcoming marketing plan to all sorts of things. I mean, we have individuals in this community that, you know, own businesses in other communities that have talked about, you know, it would be great if we had an incubator space here. We've had individuals talk about, it'd be great if we had, you know, this type of business or that type of restaurant, this, and, you know, and people are connected in ways that we don't possibly know. And it would be nice if, you know, we could maybe add something and say, hey, we're looking for this, or doing this. The other idea I had was something to help out, and I think this would kind of fall more upon volunteerism, but it could be an idea that's spurred by the city, is, you know, bringing up the gumballs. You know, we do have a lot of elderly residents in our community, and sometimes those individuals maybe used to belong to organizations or church or other civic organizations, but maybe they can't get out anymore as much, and maybe they can't afford to pay for a lawn service or something of that nature. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe facilitate, you know, these residents, or possibly, you know, if you're looking for help, or if your organization wants to help someone but you don't know who, maybe we could help facilitate that. I don't want to make, you know, senior resident here is living by herself, like, you know, I don't want to do that and make that public, but maybe something where the residents could call us and say, hey, you know, I do need help cleaning up around my house, or I'm unable to carry these items and move it out. And maybe we could keep, you know, help facilitate that with local church groups, Boy Scouts, things like that, other volunteer organizations that are looking for projects, ways to help our seniors, and then we could connect those individuals. I think that's a way we could also possibly use the newsletter and stuff like that.
Sure. We do have that currently in place. We've been dealing with the churches now for over 2 years, and they've basically been in touch with our police department. So if there's an elderly resident who needs help, our police department knows to basically reach out to those churches and say, we've got a resident that needs help with this. Those churches will then send volunteers to take care of it.
Code enforcement.
Yeah, and code enforcement.
And that's great. I just want to make sure that we make sure that these things are advertised or well known throughout the community with the seniors. And now that we have the tool in the newsletter, I know it's still in its infancy with only, you know, a few months in, but making sure that we talk about these things, that residents continue to stay informed.
Okay.
And I do think, as Alderman maybe has suggested, with some of those properties, particularly the properties that are by parks, the one off Tahiti, for example, if no one's interested in buying that, I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't make that an extension of our own park. We already own the property. It's something that should be done. Whether that be a smaller basketball court, we talked about, you know, bees, or just a community garden, something like that. I do think that if we cannot find an owner, there wouldn't be, you know, if there's not enough area, or someone wouldn't want to put in a home or something of that nature, that we do try to turn that facility that we're not using into something that the community can enjoy. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Alderman Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you. Just a few short-term goals, and then maybe, are we going to talk about long-term goals next, or what are we doing in any order?
Go ahead.
Both? Okay. So for new aldermen, I know we're going to have at least one new alderman with Mr. Wallach leaving. If you could just, for short-term goal, just revisit the like an alderman welcome packet. I think it'd be good to have a good introduction, training for the new alderman, tour of maybe the police fire department, city hall, introduction to staff, things like that. I'm not sure if that's up to date or not, but it'd be good to have that, you know, in good working order, just for that transition. I think we have a lot of things on our plate. It'd be good to have the new alderman up to speed on as many issues as possible. Along those lines, in terms of communication, this year we have a big rollout of the sidewalk and tree removal. I think as a short-term goal, it'd be really good to have a good communication program to all the residents and businesses that are impacted, so they know what's coming, what to do, what not to do, that type of thing. So just really, it's a seamless process. There's going to be a lot of disruption. It'd be good to have that communication out front. And then Adam mentioned economic development marketing, but I would like to see some, as a short-term goal, improvement to our website. I think our website's good. I think we have this new logo, whatever it ends up being. We have a lot of tools at our hand. We have a lot to offer, whether it's our walking trails, our parks, our schools, our neighborhoods, our commercial opportunities. It'd be really good to, I think, invest a little bit of money with maybe a new website company or existing one. Look at drone photography, for example. How do we incorporate the way we really want to market our city and our opportunities, and really think hard and long about that. And I think Adam did a good job of a memo recently on some of the tools he's considering, so I think that's great. It's a good step. I do think it's worth an investment in our website, because that's really how we market to the world, how we market to companies looking at maybe moving their business to Missouri, to a town like Crestwood. Let's see, and then along those lines, in terms of first impression for a long-term goal, I really think we have an opportunity here at City Hall to maybe do something different. I think it'd be great to give Adam a better tool, a better set of tools to recruit companies. And with that, I mean, like, if you go to any business in Clayton, Chesterfield, downtown, you walk into their front door, it's pretty impressive. There's their company name, there's a receptionist, there's a conference room, there's great seating, there's a flat screen TV with their information about their company or about their, in this case, the city, that type of thing. We really need to be able to, long term, how can we reutilize what we have here? Do we need to add an addition? And to really make it more of an image conscious, and then a way really to recruit, retain great companies, businesses. We have a lot to offer, a lot to sell. And I think we're kind of selling ourselves short in this kind of a 1970s, vintage office, style. I think it's time to, come up to the 21st century and really make a really cool, inviting environment for our businesses. And that kind of goes along the line with the infrastructure around it. If you look at just the restrooms, for example, we have one restroom for the men's bathroom. So I think we could do it, maybe take care of everything at once. Really make it a modern, inviting showcase, if you will, for our city. So I would like to make that a long-term goal. And then another long-term goal would be in terms of grants. I was really excited last year about the great Streets Initiative. We jumped in with Sunset Hills on that, and we came in second, I believe. So just keep our fingers on the pulse of what's happening there with East-West Gateway, to make sure we know when that's become available. Make sure we're way ahead of the curve so we hit the ground running on that opportunity, because I think that's going to be a neat way to tie this Route 66 into what we're trying to accomplish along Watson Road. And then I think what you did last year with the capital improvement ranking and priority, I think that was fantastic. I think the sooner we can see that again, and sometime in 2018, that's a great idea and a great initiative. And that's the main items I had. Thank you.
Alderman Wallach, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a few items. Again, Alderman Kennedy did a lot of the research, and I agree with a good majority of your comments in regards to even long term. This building does need a facelift. We need a new 21st century look, not like it's a 1990, 1980 look. My comments will be brief. In regards to the elephant in the room, I do agree with Alderman Charbonneau in regards to the opportunities that we have in the Crestwood Mall project. Again, we just need to see what our opportunities we have as a board. I only threw out there again the selling purchasing the property, because I read studies about Crestwood Mall, especially on Next STL has a good article about Crestwood Mall, and it says it's an item that likely needs to be. It may not be go small. I mean, it's going to take some time for it to develop. And the only reason why I say purchasing it, because that way you control it, how you feel that property should be developed, what entities need to go in there. I don't know what the foreseeability is for that project with the developer. Again, that's again, my hats are off to this board as if they're a challenge in regards to the what the next term is going to be when that project ends out in the year. So again, I don't know what type of opportunities we have for development for that property. But the other things, what I mentioned about the last meeting in regards to the Go Green, in regards to the public police vehicles. I see that on page 4, which is reflects to the city financial and environmental sustainability. I don't know if this should be a short-term priorities or not, but I do think I would encourage us to, again, to consider the Go Green as it relates to the police vehicles. We do already do it with the public works vehicle, but I think there's an opportunity for us to maintain to Go Green with our police fleet. And I don't know if that should be a short-term priority or just added into the number 4 criteria for maybe for police units. I'd rather recommend it be a short-term. That way the police committee can review it to determine whether it's an appropriate item that they need to receive in regards to going green for our police fleets. Other things what I'd like to see, I think that this past year, in regards to the curb and gutter, I think we're starting to implement as we do the streets, as it reflects to the asphalt, we continue with the curb pairs. I don't know what the path is in regards to streets that we have concrete base, but we have the asphalt overlay. Those curbs are not being addressed. And I'd like to see whether it's Public Works Department or staff get a plan or detail as to how those are going to be addressed in regards to those curbs. I think that's all really the only things that I have. The other thing, again, I think we all received an email from a citizen in regards to her thoughts of the mall project. She put a lot of time into it. I really didn't have much to really review it, but I saw the drawing of it. It looked encouraging, but again, that's a project that would take a good deal of investment and a good deal of time. So again, I just want to applaud the resident that brought that to our attention with some ideas and were her design for that project. But that's all I have for right now. You have the floor.
Mr. Bond's here tonight, by the way. She, the one that drew out the plans for us. So.
Oh, very nice.
And I'm going to forward those to Urban Street.
Okay. Perfect.
Alderman Statter?
I don't have much more to add. I've been thinking more and more about this property on Tahiti. It's over across from Spellman Park, and I think I'm going to have some ideas to put forward on that. There's a lot of interesting pocket park ideas that are out online. I've actually been perusing them while we're sitting here talking. We are limited because we can't get water there in any kind of an economical fashion, which we did look into as part of maybe doing there some kind of a public garden, which made that prohibitive. I'm wondering if...
Where was this Alderman Statter?
You know where Spellman Park is?
Yeah.
So not the Spellman side, but all the way across Tahiti.
Oh, okay.
So right across the street there, that's our property.
Okay.
And so there's a backyard on either side, and it's not a huge space, but it's certainly something we could do with. The idea of a basketball court is fun, but I'd kind of like to see us try to do something a little unique there. Maybe something, you could do a little sculpture garden with benches. There's lots of things that we could do, but we are a little bit limited because we can't bring water in there. So as far as the garden goes, that's problematic. I'm wondering if we could bring electric in, if we wanted to do something like, movies in the park there a couple of times a year. It would be easy to do in that space. I need to look at it again. But anyway, thinking out loud, I'll get with you on that.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You think you got enough things to look at? Once Daryl's gone, we're going to tank these curbs and gutters. We're not going to talk about that. But, okay. You know, if you have in your
I'll
marching orders?
I will type something up and come back either the next meeting or the meeting after that, we'll put something for the board to review.
Okay, that sounds good.
Sorry, I have one more.
Is this curb and gutter related, or?
No, it's not curb and gutter related. I don't know where we are in regard to the connectivity of our trails to our neighborhoods, as well as the connectivity of the trails to Watson Boulevard. And I don't know whether that should be a long-term range or not. I know for the trail, again, we do have now, we're going to have access to Watson Road Industrial Park. But is that the connection that we foresee is the right fit for our community to have the bikers travel up Watson Industrial Road in Watson? Or is it something that we should have a bridge over the industrial park, over our property and some other adjacent property that will allow us that? Again, I'm just thinking out loud because how we can connect those residents in different fashions, walkability, bikeability, to that mall property, or to Crestwood, to Watson Road, rather than through the industrial park.
Maybe if you like Pittsburgh did, we just put one of those big trams that goes down the hillside to there. Because that's quite an elevation change there. And I think we've determined that you're really not going to be able to create a switchback that's going to be accessible. It's just terrain's just too steep. So, I think that'll probably fall under a Watson Road plan with regards to the bikeability up the hill. I noticed today there's probably more than enough room right now on that Watson Road bridge if barricades were put up for people to basically ride their bikes from the trail up along and across the bridge over Gravel Creek or Mulberry Creek, whatever that is, and then on up the hill to the mall site. And then the other access would be from Sappington Road, would be from the Grants Trail up to the mall side on the St. Elizabeth side of the street, sidewalks. So, all right? Okay. All right. So unless there's anything else, that takes care of our discussion on the long and short-term goals and objectives. And I will move on to the next item, which was introduction of future bills or issues. And I see nothing. And Alderman Miguel?
Did you say future issues?
Huh?
Did you say future issues?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to throw something out. And actually, the mayor introduced this earlier when he talked about student safety and what the city's doing. And I'm just wondering if this board should have that conversation about student safety, about gun safety. And I'm certainly not looking to violate anybody's gun rights. After speaking with the mayor about a week or so ago, as I previously mentioned, the mayor forwarded an article to me. And the title of that article is, "Here's How to Prevent the Next School Shooting, Experts Say." I guess I'm just wondering if this board should have that conversation or comment on this issue of student safety. And perhaps the conversation might even go to cover drugs, opiates, and stuff. So I'm throwing that out, and if there's any interest in that, I'd appreciate if someone would comment along those lines. And if so, then we could make that an item of discussion at the next meeting.
And I agree, Alderman Miguel, that what I would ask you allow us to do is give myself, the other city officials, like our police chief, the opportunity to meet with the Lindbergh school officials and get information from them as to what they're doing. Because let's face it, we as aldermen and mayor, there's really nothing we can do. We're not going to don bulletproof vests and rush to the scene when there's a school shooting or an active shooter. It's going to be up to the police and the emergency responders to handle that thing. But I think that it's important for us as a board to know that there is a system in place and just what that system is. And so I'd like to for you to give us time to get those meetings completed, the police chief, the opportunity to have had discussions with the other city chief, police chiefs around us, because one of the things we talked about was school safety is if there's a active shooter at Truman, that's really in Sunset Hills, the school itself. But we would be responding as the closest municipality. If our officers aren't familiar with the grounds or the school itself, they have no idea where to go if they get there. So, you know, we're talking about ways of our officers getting together with Sunset Hills and doing a walkthrough of those buildings over the summer so that our officers do know what they are. Talking to the school about numbering or lettering buildings at the high school so that they, when our officers respond to, you know, active shooter in building A, they can see building A and they can forget about B, C, D, and E for the time being. So, you know, there's a lot of planning and a lot of discussion that needs to go into that, and we've started that, and I'd like to have a little more time to put something together before we actually get into board discussion on it. Otherwise, I don't know that the board really has anything to, contribute to the issue right now.
I agree with you, Mayor, and take whatever time you need and come back to us with a suggestion as far as when it might be appropriate to discuss. And I realize that we cannot legislate on things like guns.
Sure.
That is up to Jefferson City. But as a board, we could make our let the public know where we stand on the various issues. So I think it would be important for our voice to be heard.
I think one of the things that we as a board can do, though, is we can speak in unison to the state legislators, our state representatives, our state senators, that, hey, we support the citizens and the citizens support us, and if you want to get reelected in the next election, you're going to pass House Bill 19. People need to start worrying about what the issues are, and not so much whether you're Republican or Democrat.
Exactly.
But yes, I would be happy to bring that forward. Just see this as a way to get votes to support it, to support our efforts, not necessarily go off and try to do something different. So it's our way. It's a grassroots right now on our part, but it's something that I feel very serious and dedicated to, because it does involve every one of our kids. You know, and when there's a school shooting and 17 kids or 19 kids get murdered in some municipality or some school, it doesn't affect just those people whose kids were killed. Everybody feels bad about it. And so you're right. You know, we need as a board to show our support, and maybe what we do is a resolution. And I think that Chris was looking at that. I'll let you comment on it.
Well, I think you had raised my awareness to the fact that the city of Clayton had adopted a resolution urging Jeff City to take some action, and so I grabbed that resolution and sent it to you for consideration.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I got it. And they basically just said that they're going to support, this legislation. They're going to support all opportunities to control guns and illegal guns, or guns in the hands of people that aren't supposed to have them. Felons, mentally incapacitated individuals, that type of stuff. So, yeah, give us some time to work on this, but I think that it's a great cause. There's a lot of tremendous information out there, and I would only ask that in preparation for future talks, that you look at everytownresources.org and take a look at some of the information that they have compiled there. because they're on top of things. And they've got a lot of really, really high-profile professionals involved in helping them put that together. So, everytownresources.org. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Alderman Miguel, I think you were, or maybe you were next. Did you have a future issue?
That wasn't my future issue.
No, I'm sorry.
Alderman Miguel just asked for a comment on his. I think you basically covered it, Mr. Mayor. I applaud you for taking the lead on this and setting up these meetings with Lindbergh and the police departments. If any actionable items arise out of those meetings that this board is requested to take action on, I think we're all open to that. And then just another thought kind of occurred to me during your dialogue with Alderman Miguel is I know we have XYZ amount budgeted for various city employees to attend certain predetermined conferences, but if there are additional public safety conferences or training seminars that are being offered to police chiefs or commanders, I for one am open. If the chief says, hey, I'd really like to attend this conference, I didn't put it in the budget, but I think it's helpful in light of the recent events, I think we'd be open to obviously facilitating that, so that's what we can do.
And that may be good. That may be good information for our school resource officers, the ones that train DARE and teach DARE and stuff in the school. Yeah. So, no, good points. Alderman Sherman.
Yes, thank you. I just I wanted to comment really quickly on something. If this issue, I do believe we should be in this conversation because ultimately it is our children that go to these schools, or we know the children that go to these schools, and also, will be our police department, our shared resources. So all the knowledge is powerful, right? We need to make sure that we share that information so we are aware in case, heaven forbid, something horrible would happen, that our officers are fully prepared and ready to help undertake any issue that's asked of them. Two other things, if this were to be brought up in future conversations, or if we're asked to maybe push something that is going to borderline on the verge of political, because this is a political issue, I do ask that we would maybe get a little bit of advance notice, particularly on the legislation that we're asked to maybe say we support or don't support, particularly when it comes to Jefferson City. And secondly, I would actually caution the new school, the website you're suggesting. I'm sorry, what was the name of the group again? It's the Bloomberg organization that puts this out. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, it's his organization that's founded this. Statistically, they have put out a lot of numbers that mainstream modern media have called completely false. So please, just as everything you read on the internet, please caution that. I believe they used the first number that there was like 28 school shootings so far this year, when in fact, they consider anything within a zone of a school a shooting. For example, there was a gentleman who committed suicide on the parking lot of they considered that a school. So just keep in mind that as we talk about this is a political issue. There are people on every side that are going to twist, bend facts. So I just encourage everyone to keep an open mind and realize that there's going to be probably a lot of opinions that come out about this on every side. So I think discussion is great. As you all know, I am a very active hunter. I've been taught gun safety my whole life because I grew up in the country. We had guns in our house, but we took care of them. We stored them properly. We taught respect, and I think that's a lot of the issue today. We can talk about this. I have no problem talking about it because I think personally, it's all politics. I think it's politics by both sides. They use this to push a political agenda on both sides. And if you really want to find a solution, that is going to have to be set down. And then actual policy and things are going to have to be discussed. So I have no problem discussing this issue. I just want to let everyone know that if it gets political, don't be shocked. Sure. Thank you.
One other thing I'll mention under future issues, if I may, is that City Administrator and I met with the folks from the 2020 census, And they've asked us to establish a committee of citizens, church pastors, people of that sort to help make sure that we as a community get as many of our residents to report their census information, because that information will dictate how much of the, what was it, how much was it, 60 or 600 billion or whatever, 60 billion? Anyway, it was in the billions of dollars that the federal government distributes to the municipalities based on population. So it's going to be important for the city of Crestwood to make sure as many or all of our residents get counted so that we have the opportunity to gain as much of those dollars as we possibly have available to us. So we'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks or month to looking for volunteers that are interested in working with us on that. So, okay, if you've got anybody in your wards that you know is really super interested in this, send them our way. Send them our way. So, and I know we'll get good participation from the churches and the pastors. So, anyway, that's all I had. Okay, we'll move on to the next issue on the agenda, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Thank you very much. Thank you, residents, for coming tonight.